It's Jimmy. It's Jimmy.
Hey Matt, how's it going?
Good, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
You know, I cannot complain.
That's always a good thing.
You know, I realize nobody listens when I complain, so I might as well stop doing it.
Hey, I think I've been there too, so I get it. At this point, you just kind of keep it in and just keep on trucking along, right?
Exactly.
Well, I mean, the good news is that you have a film coming out, so that's always a good thing. If you know in this industry, especially this being your first feature, that's pretty exciting times for you, isn't it?
Look, if you don't enjoy this part, then I really ought to find a different line of work.
No question. You know, let's delve into it. I wanted to. How did you come across the script, and what kind of made you want to do this? Because it's a really cool story. I think it's super relatable, and it's a sort of movie that we can all find, people like that in our lives or relate to the emotions and these characters. But how did you come across it initially and kind of get around it?
Yeah, I mean, what you just said actually is a huge part of it. You know, I've been looking for something to direct for a while, and a producing colleague of mine who I'd worked with on a couple other films sent this to me, and I read it, I think, in one sitting, and really quickly it just, it got its hooks into me, and I, even from the first time I read it, it sort of was what you hopefully saw, which is there are moments that I thought were, laugh out loud funny, and then there was, couples with some real pathos, and I loved the fact that it was, without being kind of heavy-handed, it felt like it was really about something, and that it dealt with things that, I know I struggle with, things like the nature of regret and, the choices you make, and whether there are certain mistakes that are sort of too deep to come back from in a way that I thought would, hopefully resonate with people kind of across all demographics.
Mm-hmm. And this is a story, in a lot of ways, especially the creatives can understand that, in any form, not only comedians, but actors, and hell, even myself coming out to LA to do entertainment journalism, it's not what it appears a lot of times, and there's real struggle involved. How much of it you personally kind of related to it being a filmmaker in a lot of ways, and understanding the struggle, and it's not what it always seems to be, and you get grounded by pursuing this profession in so many ways, especially when you come out to LA or New York. How did you apply your own personal interactions or experiences in kind of telling this story?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's, it is a super humbling experience, and I think especially, in the social media age where it's very easy to kind of, cultivate an online persona that maybe doesn't always match reality. And, for me, I moved out here. I was working at the Justice Department in a job that was, very easy to understand, if you weren't, necessarily in it. It was something that kind of you could explain to your, uncle or whatever, and it was easily digestible and relatable. And then to say, well, you know what, I'm going to leave this sort of secure government job and go try and make movies. It's definitely something that caused some sideways glances, and it's just, basically that it is, it's very easy to kind of look askew at pursuing artistic endeavors because they are, more amorphous and harder to understand. And what does a producer do every day? What does a director do every day? It's not as prescribed. And I think, did I lose you before I relayed the Always Sunny interview? Yes. So, I was saying it was when I first moved out here, plus or minus. So, if I'm wrong, sorry. But I remember reading an interview with one of the Always Sunny guys, who was sort of right after that show had hit, and they were talking about how they were, everybody was calling them an overnight success, but they've been working struggling actors for a decade. And then when Always Sunny hit, it hit overnight. But nobody sort of saw the decade of pushing a boulder up a hill. And I remember that was very sort of grounding for me when I read it, to realize that, everything isn't just, rainbows and butterflies. And, I don't think it's unique to artistic pursuits. I think one of the things that's been really cool for me has been traveling around with the film, is, in the sort of run up to release, going to different festivals all across the country, and seeing how people can, people in the arts, not in the arts, in New York and LA, in, cities, towns, all across the country have really kind of related to this story and these struggles in a way that's been really humbling.
Really like the relationship here. Obviously, you find a comedian dermatologist. On the surface, you wouldn't think they have anything in common. You know, polar opposites, different age groups. But then the life experiences, I think that's the bonding moment. Like, you know, Billy's character has a lot of wisdom, you know, and life experiences that he has to pass on and teach, and about relationships and stuff. I found that really... I connected to that in a lot of ways. Kind of always, you know, having a lot of friends maybe of older age too, and just getting the valuable experience, life experiences. Tell me about those conversations that you had with the actors, with Ben and Billy, and just the kind of reality of it. Because I just felt like some of this stuff can be really scripted. It must come from the heart and inside of personal experiences. How did you approach the conversations that happen in the movie? Because they felt just really genuine and real, actually.
Well, thank you, because that's definitely, I mean, creating a sort of world that felt grounded and real is something that's really important to me, and it was important to Peter Hoare, the screenwriter, who's incredibly talented. And, you know, it was really getting Ben and Billy engaged and involved early. It was, some of it is chemistry that you can't direct, right? Mm-hmm. You know, you'd rather be lucky than good. Ben and Billy really didn't know each other. I don't think they'd even met before
Wow.
cast them. They met once at Billy's office, and then, you know, 2 days before we started filming. And their friendship has become, you know, I think they would both describe it as one of the more meaningful friendships in their lives. And they became incredibly close, incredibly quickly. And so that sort of intergenerational thing that happened on screen happened off screen as well. And that was a really neat thing to watch. And then, you know, we had a lot of conversations about just keeping the material grounded in truth. And one of the things that I really, you know, found to be such a joy about working with both of them is that whether it was in pre-production, whether it was when we were filming, whether it was when I was, you know, getting their feedback on the tutorial, at every stage of the process, everything that they brought to the table was always grounded in the characters, and was always grounded in the truth of that moment. And, you know, what would Marty and Scott do here, or how does it serve the story? It was never about just landing a joke.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the best comedy, comes from like actual natural conversations. It's not forced. That's kind of relatable, you know, in the moment. I think that's always the best comedy, where you can get funny moments and real comedic kind of elements just through conversations. You know, I always felt like, even when it comes to comedians, the funniest people are the ones that have true stories to tell, real life experiences. You just know when you go see a comedy show when someone's putting on an act or like kind of just doing a shtick, versus when they're actually sharing real life experiences, because those are relatable.
Absolutely. I mean, it's you know, it's something that you know, we talk about in the film in terms of Scott and how his, you know, routine develops. And I think that, you know, this idea of finding the humor in the everyday, and sort of the fact that what you mine from truth is always going to be more impactful, whether it's on the dramatic side or the comedic side, than stuff that just comes from a shtick or a bit.
The thing about this story that I really appreciated was the fact that in this industry, as you might know, like when you go home, it's like the end of the road. It's like you fail, but it's not necessarily that, because like to the outside, it's just like, or maybe to the person themselves, you feel like a failure because you gave it a shot, but it's really not only a humbling thing, but it's a life lesson, in a sense that you gave a lot of yourself and you tried something that other people wouldn't even attempt trying. I always felt that, you know, kind of marking someone as a failure of like having to head back home from wherever they came from, you know, after not succeeding in LA, it labeled them a failure. But I felt this movie really kind of projected, you're not really a failure. You're more, you should be kind of, you know, given credit for going for it and trying it. And there's always life lessons to learn that are probably part of your life path, you know, going back and recognizing certain things that maybe will help you in your future goals and getting back to that point. How do you feel about that essence and how the movie portrayed that? On the surface, we always think of people as failures if they didn't make it, but really, they're actually really brave in a lot of ways.
100%. And I mean, I think it's not binary, and I think people make a mistake of assuming it's binary. And also, you know, people, you know, we're malleable, flexible, and we evolve. And you know, what you wanted to do at 15, it doesn't have to be what you want to do at 30 and what you want to do at 45. You know, your goals and aspirations are allowed to change, and that's okay. And then, you know, I think there is something about the fact that, for me, and as somebody who does, you know, struggle with regret,
Mm-hmm.
The things I regret the most in my life, I never regret failing. I regret not trying.
Mm-hmm.
Things I haven't done, and be it in my personal life, my professional life, that have been governed by fear, that's the stuff I regret. The stuff that I've, when I've actually taken the shot and, missed, that I almost always feel okay about. And I just think that there is, there's also, particularly with the arts, it's one of the few industries where talent and work ethic are necessary but not sufficient. There is an element of it that's just serendipity, that's just luck. And so I think that when people, feel judged or are judged for their perceived successes or failures in a business that is incredibly fickle, they're just kind of missing the point. And so hopefully, it's kind of easy to say that because I think that's definitely one of the kind of B-side themes of this of the film is that failure isn't always what you think it is, and it can actually kind of empower you and galvanize you towards something else.
Yeah, is there anything specific you kind of, throughout the process of making this film, just either through conversations off set or even on set, anything that you kind of discovered or learned, really, in a sense that stood out to you that you might take going forward, that you maybe weren't aware of or didn't pay attention to as much prior to this film?
Yeah, it all shapes you, and I think that if you wouldn't do something different the next time, then you're not learning, and if you're not learning, why bother? So certainly, there's a lot that I took from the film. Some of it, frankly, is just the joy for me that comes with directing. I mean, it's something that I studied directing for theater, and I've been producing for a long time, always aspirationally directing and trying to sort of get that project off the ground. But it's really hard to know until you're in it, as much time as I spent on set, and there is just for me, kind of getting everybody to tell the same story, and the joy that comes with that, and the joy that comes with, being able to sort of help hone and craft and shape a story is a joy that makes pushing the boulder up the hill all, worth it.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. I gotta ask you, I don't know what sort of magic tricks you played, but to land the cast you did in your first feature, man, I don't know what sort of, you must be a hell of a negotiator and a charming personality, because Billy Crystal doesn't do many movies anymore. He's very selective with his movies, maybe once a year, if that. And for you to land him, and then you have Sonic in your movie, literally the voice of Sonic, pretty damn good, huh?
It is one of those sort of, it very quickly becomes about the work, but there is kind of a pinch yourself moment. You walk onto set first day, and Billy's stuff was up first, and so you walk onto set day one, and it's like, all right, guys, I guess we're doing this. But no, look, it all starts with script. It always has, and it always will. And I think that for me, it was what pulled me in, and then we got it to Billy. It was what pulled him in, and he and I met, and we saw the film the same way. We saw the character the same way, and we're really clear on the kind of story we wanted to tell. Then got Ben involved, and it's one of the joys of shooting in New York is that you can then fill out your cast with really just amazing actors, people I've respected. Like Deborah Monk, who plays the mom, who won a couple of Tonys. But all up and down the line, it's not just that it's Scott and Marty and it's Ben and Billy. That's all well and good, and they're terrific in the film. I'm a little bit biased, but if they don't have people to play against, it doesn't matter. And so one of the things that really attracted me to the script was that not just the two of them, but also sort of, all the supporting roles were really interesting, dynamic, and I felt like would be able to attract interesting actors who could then elevate it. And then, of course, once you get a Billy Crystal being in your movie, it makes the project, much more attractive to other actors.
Yeah, no question. I felt the supporting cast. I mean, if you have Grace Gummer, you really had, so Nate was in it, Jill. I mean, just a ton of really solid actors that working actors that you see, and people of a lot of talents to even take these kind of supporting roles and really make it their own. I thought that was tremendous.
And it's a ton of credit to our casting team, too, who did an amazing job of, it's a really hard job because, you've got to try and kind of mind meld with the way I'm seeing these roles, but also play devil's advocate and not just be rubber stamps. And they were really dialed into the New York world and the actors who were available there. And, people like Nate Cordray, who you mentioned, that's such a pivotal scene. And, getting him on board, getting Eloise Mumford on board, Becky. And then, just even people who, Michael Kostroff, who plays the rabbi, who, you've known from A Million Things Forever. These are all really sort of tender, subtle scenes that would be easy to overplay. And I think it was Mike Nichols who said directing is 90% casting. And there's a lot of truth in that.
No question. I mean, a movie changes. I mean, I couldn't, honestly, if I thought about this movie without, in a sense, even the leads, Billy and Ben, it'd be a different movie in a lot of ways. And even all the supporting actors that, if they were recast or ever, this is a completely different movie.
It is a tonally very specific film, and there are very different versions of the film. And I know I mentioned it before, but I think it really applies to the casting conversation is, the writer, Billy, Ben, myself, but, Grace, Eloise, Deborah, Kevin, Nate, Jill, Leonard, John, the whole roster, Caitlin. We were all really clear on how we wanted to tell the story, and that was not just true of casting, but it was true with my cinematographer, with my editor, all down the line. And I think that's just absolutely pivotal to this kind of storytelling.
No question. I always felt movies that are shot in New York, it's something special. I always felt movies that are shot in New York, they have a own character to itself. Like, New York is a character in a movie. What was that experience like for you, to shooting New York and using the locations, the energy even of the town and all that? Did that kind of add another element to this movie, in a sense that it was done there? How much of it is New York that comes through?
Absolutely, and frankly, even more so than I thought it would. I mean, I always think movies are well served when they're grounded in place. But I'm from Cleveland, and the movie's set and predominantly filmed on Long Island, specifically in Long Beach, which happens to be both where the writer's from and where Billy's from. And once I spent time out there scouting, there's such a specificity to it. We weren't at first sort of sure where we were going to actually film. Once you spend time out there, you realize that it really deserves to be actually shot there, and so it absolutely, I think, hopefully, is a character in the film, adds to the sort of fabric of the movie. Certain things you sort of can't make up. There's a coffee shop that is the opening scene of the film, for LA, but it's actually the coffee shop where the writer wrote the bulk of the script. Where he typed the words "at the end" on the screenplay for the first time. Did not know that when we found that location. There's a synagogue in the movie. Again, didn't communicate with Billy about this prior. Discovered after the fact that it's actually the synagogue where he was bar mitzvahed.
Wow.
So there was a lot of that kind of serendipity, that went into the thing.
Well, Matt, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me and speak your experiences and share about the movie. I really hope people see this, because I think it's a movie for everyone. Standing Up and Falling Down is a hell of a title, because it rings true not only of this storyline, but I think in a lot of facets of life in general. And I think it's a really enjoyable, fun movie. So fantastic job, man. I mean, especially this being kind of your first big major film. Awesome.
Well, that means, it really does mean a lot. So thank you, and thanks for making the time.
Absolutely. Looking forward to your future work. I think there's only good things coming up for you. So I'm sure we'll be talking again.
Thanks.
No problem, man.